Okay everyone, welcome to this video on functions. Again, I'm going to use a child allowance just so we're exploring a similar policy. But this time I wanted to dive into a code that I've already done that looks at how a child allowance would affect each and every state. This code will just create the function, and then in class this week we will use that function to create interactive data. So I think that will be pretty cool. So I'm going to do some copying and pasting, some typing, some things it's just going to be faster if I copy and paste and explain instead of you watching me type. So we're starting with a blank slate, and our goal here is to create a function. So, whoops, I want a text box. Our goal, create a function that tells us the poverty rate impact for children, adults, or all for a child allowance in each state. Of course, plus DC, it's where I live, it should be a state. So we have 51 total groups. So the goal is to be the user to be able to enter in how much they think the monthly child allowance should be, enter in what age demographic they're targeting in the state, and it'll tell you the new poverty rate for that demographic. We're not going to use it for today, but we'll need it eventually. We're going to need Max's Python package, and I'm talking a little quiet because my parents are asleep downstairs, and I don't want to wake them up. So this line of code imports Max's micro df Python package, which I'm going to give him a chance to talk about next week, and it has a lot of really cool functions that just make the coding process a lot easier. So I'm going to run that, and I'm going to get this big long message basically saying we're installing this package. Some packages come pre-downloaded on Colab. Obviously Max is pre-installed on Colab. Obviously Max's personal package does not. So we're going to install that, and then we can import our libraries. So I guess I'll type that out so I can talk about each one. We'll import pandas as PD. Again, pandas is kind of the go-to library for data science, has a lot of good data science functions. We'll import NumPy as NP. So we'll use some arrays and numbers. Then we'll import Max's microdf. We installed it, but we didn't import it as MDF. So if we want to use that later, we'll just call MDF. And then the end goal here is to make interactive charts, and we're going to use Plotly Express. So I'm going to import plotly.express as px. Oh, not x, as. No module name Plotly. Oh, Plotly. Plot. Okay. Okay, good. So now we have our libraries. We have to import our data. We're going to use a different data set this time that has 3 years worth of data. The reason we're using 3 years, and let me grab the code so we don't have to type out this. The reason we're using 3 years worth of data is when the ASEC data that we're using is meant to make predictions at the national level, not necessarily at the state level. So to increase the sample size at the state level, we're going to use 3 years of data so that we have a bigger sample size and we can be more confident that it reflects each individual state. So I'm going to create a data frame person underscore raw. I'm going to call pandas and the read CSV. And then this is a CSV file I created with 3 years of data from the ASEC, and I did not import every column, so you can only use this for a certain amount of things. I guess we can print person raw so you can see what I put in I don't even remember what I all put in here. So you can see everything that is starting with year, serial, month, CPS ID. Some of these we'll get rid of. We don't need them all. State. There's 2 weights. I forget the difference. One is the one we want, The one we want is this one. I forget why. So I should put that in the comments. We have the SPM resources, which in this file is called SPM tote res. Yeah, so that's our person raw. Let's create a copy of that called person that we're going to use. So we'll use person underscore raw dot copy deep equals true. Now I have a copy of person. Now I'm going to do what we always do. I'm going to make all the columns lowercase. So person.columns equals person.columns. We want to take the strings and make them lowercase. This next part I'm going to copy and paste off the code I already wrote, just because this says what we need to drop and what we want to rename. So you can see the two functions, and I'll make sure to explain them. I'm using the person in the person data frame. I want to drop some of these columns. I don't want serial. I don't want month. I don't want per num. I don't need any of these. And then so we're just going to drop these. And then we're going to call the person rename function. Some of these things I just don't like the name for, like asec weight. That's what asec WT stands for. I'm just going to rename it to weight. So you separate the old name and the name you want with a colon. And I'm going to name state FIP, and I'm just going to name it state so that it's pretty clear what I'm doing, what each thing stands for in my data. So now if I play this, I should see person, and you can see we drop some things. We name this weight, we name this state. You can see right now though the states are numbers, so we don't know what they are. If you look up the like asec state CPS, I forget what I looked up. Let's see. Somewhere I found online. Oh, it's called state FIP originally. Right? So this here will tell me all the numbers. 1 is Alabama, 2 is Alaska, 3 is Arizona, or 4 is Arizona. I don't know why there's not a 3. So what I did, and there's definitely someone who probably already made a package for this, but I went through and I changed them all. So let me just grab this line of code I already did, because you're definitely not going to make you watch me type out all the states. So what this line of code does is it says right now in the person data frame they were numbers, so I need to convert them to strings first. So I said person states, I called that column, is equal to person state, and I changed the type to string. So AS type string, str stands for string. So now I can go through and replace. So I'm using the replace function, replace 1 with Alabama, 2 with Alaska, 4 with Arizona, and so on. So if I run this, and if I print person, now you can see, look, main, Hawaii, you can see. And, you know, if you want to see a random sample of 10 people, we got a mess. We see their state now, it prints out. So that way the user doesn't have to memorize the state codes. Okay, so now we're doing a child allowance. We need to know who's a child, but we're also letting the user look at child and adult poverty. So we also need to know who is adults. So in our person data frame, we'll create a column called child. And a person is a child if their age is less than 18. A person is, we'll create another Boolean column. These are true false columns. If a person's age is greater than or equal to 18. So now if you printed person, you'd see a true false column. Obviously someone should be true or false for both. So you shouldn't be like false, false. You're either a child or an adult. So that worked. But when we give you a benefit, if somebody in your family gets it and you're sharing resources, it also benefits you. So we need to group people by children, because if if a parent gets a child allowance, it might not only raise that child out of poverty, it might also raise the adult out of poverty, the whole family. So we're going to create a group by function. I'm going to call this ages since we're grouping people by age. And I'm going to use group by. And first, we're going to put the things we want to group people by. And I'm using brackets here as opposed to what we've done in the past because I want to group people by multiple things. I want to group them by the SPM FAM unit, which is their SPM ID number. Just call it something different in this data set. And I want to group them by year. Why do I want to group them by year? Well, I don't want it to imagine we have 3 years of data on a mother with 1 child. If we don't group by year and SPM unit, it's going to say she has 3 children because we have 3 years of data set. But we only want we only want that child to count once in each year. So we're going to group by SPM ID and year. And now we want to take the amount of children in her home. And, oh, this should be double brackets. And the amount of adults. Not her home, everyone's home. And we want to call the sum function to sum them up. So we've used the group by function to sum those up. Now we want to make those, we want to rename this column. Because right now it's naming those columns child and adult, but we already have a column named child and adult. And that doesn't actually represent what they are. It's the total children and the total adults. So we can create it in the ages data frame. Rename these columns. Total children and total adults. Now I want to take this ages data frame and put it onto the person data frame. So we're going to say person is equal to person dot merge. We want to merge on ages and we want to merge on SPM FAM unit and the year. And okay, so I'm just going to rerun everything. Probably don't need to do that, but I should have printed person. So I'm rerunning everything, and cool, let me print person. So we should have a column that says total children and total adults for each person now. Good. And this tells us how many total children and how many adults are living in each family, where they live, etc. Okay, so we have all the information to create our function now. So let's do that. When we create a function in Python, you use def for define, and then whatever you want to name your function. Remember, a function functions have inputs and outputs, just like in, if you're think about it in math. I input something and it outputs something. So we're gonna name our function first so that when we call this function, it knows what the input should be and what it should output. So we're gonna name this CAPOV, I guess, right? Because it's child allowance and poverty. Now, inside the parentheses after the function, you can see it kind of turns it to this color to show it's a function. We're going to say what we want the inputs to be, or the arguments, as they're called in Python. Well, I want the user to be able to input the state. I want them to be able to input the age group that they care about for poverty. So is it an adult, a child, or everyone? And I want them to be able to input the monthly child allowance. And I'm going to say this equals 0, which means if a person does not specify the child allowance monthly, it'll default to 0. So if they just say Hawaii and child, and they don't put in a number, it'll say what the current child poverty rate is in Hawaii without a child allowance because it's 0. So we've defined our function and we've said these are going to be the 3 inputs. Put a colon, and we start to type our function. Now, the first thing I want is the user selects the state. So as soon as the user inputs the state, I only want to worry about the people in that state. So we're going to create a new data frame that is only the people in the state that the person selects. So this is the target persons, right? These are the people we're worried about. The target persons are going to be in the person data frame, in the state column. What state do they select? So it's saying in the person data frame, in the state person.state column, a person selects state. So it's taking this input and putting it here. So if the person types Pennsylvania, it's saying take the person column, and if the person selects Pennsylvania, then we only want Pennsylvania, and then make a copy of that. So let's make sure we understand this line because it's pretty important. It's saying, again, in the person data frame, in the state column, okay, the person selects a state, which is this input here. Make a copy of the person data frame so it has all the data we have in that data frame, but only for this state now. So now we have it down to the state we want. So we want the total population of that state now. So let's say total population of the state, because eventually what is poverty? It's the rate, it's the number of people in poverty divided by the total people. I'm just thinking real quick. Sorry. Yeah. I actually don't think we need this now that I'm thinking. We don't want the total population, and I know that was bad, but I guess you can kind of, for an explainer video, but you can kind of see the thought process. We don't care about the total population because if a person selects child, we're not going to divide by the total population. We're going to divide by the target person's population. So yeah, I don't know why I did that when I originally wrote this code. So let me just take this and I'm going to make it a comment for now, all of this. So if I just put a hashtag in front of it, it's not actually going to calculate it. So I'm going to put all that there for now. This calculated the total population, the adult population, the child population, but I don't know if we need those. So this is a lot of information at once, but I'm going to create an if statement within this function. And I think if statements are pretty intuitive. It's saying if we do one thing, then this happens. So now I want to worry about this line, worried about the person selecting the state, what state. But now we need to worry about what age group they select. So if age group is equal to child, so if the person types child for age group, then what do we want to happen? Well, then we want our target person's data frame to only include children. So let's say that it only target persons will now equal target persons dot child. So it's only going to take the people who are true for target persons dot child. So now it's created a new data frame. Well, we need another if statement, and maybe you could try this on your own, where if they select an adult, then what do we want to happen? Well, then we want target persons to equal target persons dot adult. So we could do an else statement, like else select everyone, but that'll just be the default. You don't need to do an else. If that's just going to be the default, it'll select everyone. So technically, when someone selects age group, if they don't type child or if they don't type adult, target persons will just be everyone. So they could type everyone for age group, they could type all, they could type flower, they could type nothing at all, and it will select everyone. Only if they select if they input child for age group, it'll select children. If they input adult, it'll select adults. If not, it's going to select everyone. So we've taken care of the state input. We've taken care of the age group input. Now let's start to worry about the child allowance input. So they input a child allowance amount. So we want to figure out the total child allowance that each person gets. So in the target person's data frame, let's create a variable total child allowance. And a person's total child allowance is going to be equal to their total children, right? Times the child allowance amount. So their total children times the amount this person inputted, and then times 12, right? Because, you know, they get it over a year. They are only inputting the monthly amount. So now this part starts to look familiar. Now we need to calculate their new SPM resources, right? So their new SPM resources is going to be equal to their child allowance amount, so their total CA plus, what is it called in this one? What's it called? SPM tot res, I believe. Yeah. So SPM tot res is their original SPM resources, their post-tax and transfer income. Now we're adding the child allowance amount to it. So let's figure out who's poor now. Person is poor if their new SPM resources is less than their poverty threshold, right? You're still poor. And in this data that I imported, it's called SPM thresh, I believe. So their poverty threshold, SPM thresh. Okay, so we've created the child allowance. We found their new post-tax and transfer income, and we have said, found out who's poor. So now that we know who's poor, we just need to figure out the poverty rate for our target persons, which, remember, target persons is a data frame that the user essentially creates given the output or inputs. They select the state, they select the age group, and it will create a data frame, target persons, based on the people they are targeting. That's why I'm calling it target persons. So the target population is going to be equal to target persons dot weight, and sum it up. So this saying, take everyone who's in the target person's data frame that they selected and sum them up. How many people are in the data frame? And the total poor is going to be equal to target persons dot weight. I don't know why this would be in double parentheses. What am I doing? Sorry, target persons dot weight. But we now, instead of summing up everyone, we only want to sum up the people that are poor. So since target person's poor is Boolean, either true or false, and true is 1 and false is 0, by multiplying, we're essentially getting rid of the people that aren't poor. So this is creating the total amount of people that are poor. Now, we could create a new variable poverty rate, but we could just say, well, what do we want this function to return? So this was focused on the inputs, and this was focused on the outputs. So we want it to return, well, what is the poverty rate? Poverty rate is the total poor divided by the total pop. And we're going to convert it to a percentage. So I'm going to multiply by 100, And then we're going to use the round function. So that's why this is all in parentheses. So we're going to do dot round. And I want to round to 1 decimal. So this is, okay, so I really don't think I needed this. And I think that was a mistake in my original code, is that we don't care about the total population of the state. We don't care about the adult population or the child population. We care specifically about the overall population of this unique data frame, target persons, that is created by the user based on the inputs. So just like high level understanding, think about every time you input a state or an age group, you're creating a unique data frame, target persons, that only focuses on those people. So again, if you select Maine and adults, it will create a data frame, because we told it to, that selects only the people in Maine and then selects only the adults. And now target persons is only the adults in Maine, and we can create, now here, I think this all makes sense to you. We're just calculating the poverty, and then this returns the poverty rate. So let me run everything from the top and make sure it works. Now this is just creating a function. We're not calling this function on anything, so nothing should print when we finish it. Oh, okay, this should be a double equals, because this is saying age group equals child. It's like double equals is telling it to check to see if it equals. Okay, there we go. Okay, so let's see if it worked. Let's call the CA_POV function that we created. So it's like calling any other function. And let's try it out. So let's say some of these, Florida, I don't know, easy to spell, I can spell that. Okay, so it tells us the parameters of our function, state, then age group, then monthly. That's pretty nice, right? It tells the user what to input. So I've inputted the state, now I'm going to do the age group. Let's do children. And now the default of the child allowance monthly is 0, so I don't need to enter that. I can actually play this and it'll tell me the current child poverty rate in Florida. I made a mistake. This was not, we didn't call this total, we call this target. So now it's returning an error because my function didn't work. See, I named it target poor here, but then when I called it here, I called it total pop. So if I replay the function and replay this, there we go. So the current child poverty rate in Florida is 19.6%. Our function tells us this. Well, now if I want to add in CA monthly, and I'm going to say, let's give everyone child $200 a month. Well, now it's 12%. So we dropped it 7.6% percentage points by just giving every child $200 a month. 300 is 9.8. Well, what if I'm worried about Maine? Oh, okay. At Maine, at $500 or $300 a month, it's only 5.5%. You see how it works. This is a really good start, right? This is awesome. But eventually we're going to want to make graphs and things that are easy for the user to use so they don't have to actually input it every time. And that's where we're going to pick up this week. So make sure you understand this code. I know I introduced a couple new concepts. This should all be pretty, like, okay, you know how to import libraries, you know how to import data. This is just dropping and renaming. Those are just new functions that you learned. Again, this looks like a long piece of code, but it's really just tedious. It's not hard to understand. We've done this group by stuff before. And the function stuff is new, but just try to make intuitive sense of it. I know the if statement is new too, but I think it also should make pretty intuitive sense. If someone's age group is child, then the target persons are only children. If someone's age group is adults, then the target persons is only adults. So yeah, we'll pick up from here in class and reach out with any questions. Just, make sure you understand this before class.